Hey, good morning. Well, this is new technology to us, so I hope it's working fine, and I hope that we handle it fine, being able to be seen and heard at this end. So appreciate everybody dialing in for this. To give a little bit of background, some of the e-community Western Kansas people many of the e-communities in the western part of the state were able to attend a retreat that Simone had in Waukene about a month ago. And we were able to explain some of this that we're talking about. At the same time, some of the e-communities in the eastern part of the state were able to attend a very similar retreat 2 days later in Iola, and thus were able to kind of get up to speed on this. At the same time, we've talked with a lot of different e-communities individually. So we've really tried hard to ensure everybody's on the same page with where we're going. That being said, there were several of the e-communities in the central part of the state that attended a get-together we had, but it was back in December, and we didn't really have this figured out yet. And at the same time, many we just haven't had a chance to talk to. They couldn't make it to one of the retreats or whatever. So we're trying our very best to get in front of everybody, be on the same page with everybody. We consider this a true partnership. And so it's important to us that we are transparent and with everybody in a collaborative fashion as we talk through any changes. So as you know, 6-7 months ago, we moved to a regional fund. I'll get this technology figured out. Bear with me. 6 or 7 months ago, we migrated to a regional fund idea where instead of each e-community having their own loan fund, their fund became a part of one of 3 regional funds. And with that, each community was either a level 1 or a level 2. And I'm pretty sure that everyone that's on this webinar with us is aware of the level 1 and the level 2 that you are. What I'm going to do, the way we're going to go about this, is I'm going to share a little bit of the reason why we've migrated to this. And then Anne is going to talk and share about when we start on July 1st, what it'll look like going forward. So while I know some of the people on this webinar have questions about the level 1, the level 2, where you're at and things, I'm asking you not to worry about that at all, to mentally leap to July 1st when Anne starts, when everything starts fresh, if you will, because it's only about 55 days until then. So I don't want to worry about where we're at now. So I'm going to cover the kind of the why and the history, and Anne's going to take us from July 1 on. So with that, a few things that I think may be interesting to some of you, some key dates, also to highlight how active the loan fund has been. We selected our first 6 e-communities in 2007. In early 2012 was the first time that the bank funds were able to count as a match. Prior to that, the entrepreneur's money put into the deal and the bank money put into the deal were set aside. They didn't count towards that 60-40. At that point, you had to utilize a CDC, or maybe it was IWW funds or USDA funds, something to make that 60-40 match with e-community. It's hard enough for me to explain how that worked, but that's the way the statute was. For those of you that were around with us prior to that, you remember how cumbersome it was to make it work in practice. Well, in early 2012, we found out there's a little leeway in the statute, and our board approved that the bank loan could count as the match. Made things a lot easier, certainly stimulated more e-community loans being made. Jump forward a year to early 2013. A lot of you can picture this, the way the e-community has always worked is you'd sell tax credits, you'd get that money in January into your loan fund, and that's what you had to kind of live on until the next tax credit time in the next January. It was just kind of a jump year to year. like that. We started to, in 2013, encounter some e-communities that were utilizing their loan funds to such a point that they were running out of money. May, June, July, they were out of money and were going to have to last until January. So the board put in place something called Phase 2, where I had the ability to approve, and you may remember, some of you'd fill out just a short 2-3 page application, just an update kind of a deal. And I had the ability to move $100,000 from just our general loan fund to your individual e-community account middle of the year to help you make it to the next tax credit time. Well, if you picture when we would move that $100,000 to, just to make one up, let's say Republic County's e-community account, it was money we would never get back. That e-community would loan it out, get it back, loan it out, get it back. So we were essentially giving away that money, granting it to the e-community. It was fine. Over the course of about 3.5 years, we used it probably 9 or 10 times. So about $1 million over 3.5 years. So, a couple $100,000 a year was not that big a deal. Well, the bottom part of this graph right here shows the e-community loan usage and how much it has gone up over the last couple of years. I mean, since we started in 07, there have been 441 loans made by the e-communities, about $12.7 million. That's just through the end of last year. Here's what I want to point out. If you look down there just a line or two, of the 441 loans, 94 were made last year alone. So of 10 years worth that made 441, 94 were last year alone, and 3.7 million of the 12.7 was last year alone. So, and if you see those asterisks, the reason I have that 90 to 110,000, that's basically how much loan repayment comes back each month into the various e-community accounts, principal and interest each month. So kind of do the mental math with me for a minute. $110,000 a month is about $1.3 million a year comes back, and you can see that last year 3.7 was loaned out. You can kind of see a little bit of a trend as the usage goes up. This chart is, a lot of you have seen this. I know that our staff, we see this all the time. We update this every month. But I think some of you may find this a little bit interesting. But basically the stats at the bottom, the fact that our loans, our e-community money, we've held at 16 or 17% for a long time. Your loans are only 16 or 17% of all the money that's going into the e-community deals. There's another 83, 84% of bank loans, CDC money, all that stuff. The other stuff at the bottom are just stats that we keep, we update. I think you might find that very interesting. I'd like to, for just a quick second, brag, if you will, on the e-communities. When you look at that 12% business failure rate, I think that's incredibly strong, and so do most of the bankers we talk to. When you look at this money, that it's the final 17% of the money that's gone into the deal. There's only, the average loan's about 30 grand out of e-community. The final 17% that went into the deal. And look at those stats. Half of the businesses are in towns under 5,000 people. Almost half the businesses are startups. 1 out of 4 are retail, 1 out of 5 are restaurant. When you swirl all that together, to only have a 12% business failure rate over a 10-year period of track record. And a good chunk of those businesses are still making loan repayments to preserve their credit. That's very strong, and it tells me not a lot about Network Kansas, but it tells me that our e-communities are very good stewards of the money. So, to get to the crux of today, as I said, over the course of those 3.5 years, we used Phase 2 9 or 10 times, not a big deal. As activity progressed so drastically in 2017, that through 7 months of the year, I had approved Phase 2 14 times. So $1.4 million had basically been taken out of our bank account, put into e-community bank accounts that we would never get back. It's not an issue of cash flow. We're a well-funded organization, but it's an issue of, is that the right thing to do with the money? Are we being good stewards? We didn't feel like it. We felt like things needed to change. So we put a halt on phase 2 in the summer. And all of us with eCommunity on our staff, and a whole lot of you that are on this webinar and have been in meetings and stuff, you've held our hand through this deal. We've held your hand. It's been a group thing as we've tried to figure out what we want this thing to look like going forward. And we had 4 primary considerations we wanted to keep in mind during this. Number 1, we wanted to keep the active e-communities still having money, still being able to loan funds as they saw fit. Secondly, we wanted to try and accomplish that without it coming out of without us footing the bill, if you will. Thirdly, we have 61 e-communities. And you'll get this, it's a bell curve. You know, there's a couple dozen of the communities that are just that are at the front of the bus, just doing outstanding things. There's another couple dozen that are doing wonderful, right in the middle, very active, couldn't be happier. And there's probably a dozen or so communities that it's a pretty inactive relationship, in all honesty. It's just it's not a priority for them. And that's fine, that's okay. Because of that, though, there's probably $2 million of e-community bank loans or e-community bank account loan funds that are dormant, haven't been used in years. So we wanted to find a way, if possible, to put that money into play. And then the fourth thing is, as I said, there's various levels of priority that entrepreneurship-led economic development fits. With some communities, it's a high priority. With some, it's a priority, and some, it's a lesser priority. And all of that's good, and that's what, and Anne will explain that in a few minutes. It's fine. But we wanted to try and maybe unlevel the playing field some. Some of those communities that it's a very, very high priority, they are asking for a lot of our time, a lot of our effort, a lot of our money, a lot of our tools and toys, and we wanted to be able to provide more to those communities because they have chosen to make it a very high priority. So those were the 4 considerations we had in mind since August. We've been grinding on this pretty hard. And that brings us to where we're moving forward starting with July 1st. So thanks for the time to share the history and the why. And Anne's going to slide her chair over. And like I said a few minutes ago, kind of mentally take yourself to July 1st at this point. Thanks.
Hello, everybody.
How smooth was that transition?
Well, I hope that this is worth your time just for our humorous change of set alone. But I wanted to take a second and introduce myself because we have a couple of new names on the call that I don't think I've gotten a chance to meet. I'm Anne Dewvall with Network Kansas. I've been here about 10 years and I manage the eCommunity Partnership. So that's why I'm sharing with you today about the eCommunity Partnership and what we're doing next. So as Erik mentioned, there are a lot of really well-founded and deeply thought out reasons behind the changes that we're making. And I know it may seem to some of you like this is just a lot of change. You know, we changed things back in January and now we're changing things again. But in my eyes, and I hope that by the end of my presentation you see it this way too, this is just sort of one more step down the same path. A lot of the changes that I'm going to talk about shortly are just minor evolutions of what we rolled out in January. So I'm hoping that it's going to be very easy to understand. But, you know, sort of speaking to this in a broader sense, you know, I've had the privilege of working on the eCommunity Partnership as a project for about 8 years, I think. And even this to me feels like a consistent evolution over time because, you know, all of our goals are the same. And a lot of the resources that we have available are the same. And at the end of the day, what we're looking for is an ability to forge two-way partnerships with communities who are committed to using entrepreneurship as an economic development strategy. And as Erik mentioned, for some of you, this is extremely important. It's something you think about a lot and that you really want to do more of in your day-to-day work. And for others of you, this is just one more tool in the toolbox. And so we hope that not only are we going to be able to sort of better identify communities that want to pursue entrepreneurship and give them sort of more resources and help them more, but we're also hoping to roll out essentially custom options. You know, in the past we had this one option, it was really big, and essentially lasted forever. And so, you know, just like a business, we're continually learning, and what we've heard from you guys, you know, our customers essentially, is that you want things that fit you. And so that's what we've tried to come up with as well. Erik mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, but I wanted to kind of reiterate just in case you have really absorbed the information about our January 1 changes, and make it clear about what's happening right now and what happens next. Right now, we're in essentially a 6-month gap period. That's not really the way that we've been messaging this or telling you this, because we don't want you to view it as throwaway time. But this gave us a chance from January 1, 2018 to June 30th, 2018. It's about a 6-month period. It gave us a chance to roll out those regional loan funds, see them at play, and figure out if some of the numbers and assumptions and guesses we'd made were about right, or if we needed to tweak things before we kind of stuck with it for the long haul. And that's something that, you know, sort of we were looking at behind the scenes, but it's also a really great chance for Network Kansas to align the e-community work with our fiscal year. One of the reasons that we're doing this, and one of the reasons why we're able to do this, is because we have decoupled the e-community program from selling tax credits. So we no longer need to coordinate the e-community process with the fall and end of year tax credit donation you know, process. And instead, this gives us the opportunity to refocus and align the e-community program with activity. That's really what we're hoping to do here, is work with you guys at a deep level to accomplish a lot of things in your communities to move the needle on entrepreneurship. So it really allows us to do that with you, and allows us to do some practical things behind the scenes that will let us do a better job of budgeting and predicting kind of what your needs are for the year, and you know, honestly simplify things for us. And the more that we can do behind the scenes to be efficient, the more of ourselves we can give to you to try to improve our service. Okay, so the first change that is sort of just a tweak, we're moving from 2 levels to 3 levels. Now, I do want to apologize to you guys because this is kind of a terrible name. Level 1, 2, and 3, like that's the name of the program. And all I can say to that is nobody came up with any better ideas. So if you have some creative ideas for what we should be calling this instead, I welcome it. But at the same time, I think it's pretty easy to understand. 1, 2, and 3. 1 is the most, 2 is the middle, 3 is the least. What that does not mean, however, is that 1 is good, 2 is mediocre, and 3 is bad. If there is nothing that you take away from this presentation other than this message, please let that be it. In no way are we trying to separate these groupings of e-communities into any kind of value judgment, or emphasize that the 1 communities are the only good ones out there. Instead, what we're trying to do is create these different levels of service and engagement that is determined, you know, sort of in a 2-way manner. You know, on one hand, we're going to be evaluating sort of your progress and your activity, but you are also telling us by your progress and your activity how deeply you want to work together. What we're really trying to accomplish is that custom fit, that just right kind of Goldilocks situation. So if you're wanting to do a lot with entrepreneurship, you're going to get more because you're giving more, and vice versa. And so what we're really looking for is a partnership. And you know, we want to work with anybody who wants to make progress on entrepreneurship, but the place where we're going to really focus our attention and resources are those who are just deeply interested in using entrepreneurship as their primary economic development strategy. So once again, this is what's going to take effect July 1. It doesn't change at all what's happening right now. So if you already know what level you are and what resources you have, it doesn't change that. This takes effect July 1. We'll be doing a new batch of scoring, and we'll determine the 1, 2, and 3 levels for the next fiscal year. But what you'll be looking at is very similar. Level 1 and level 2 stay basically the same. with a $250,000 annual loan fund maximum for level 1. Level 2 has $100,000 that they can spend over the course of a year, and level 3 still has $75,000 that you can spend over the course of a year. The loan maximums are going to stay really similar. Level 2 and level 3 can make up to a $45,000 loan as long as the appropriate matching conditions are met. And then level 1 has kind of that extra bonus ability to make a loan of up to $75,000. All eCommunity partners make all loan decisions. That does not change. We think you have done a great job of that. As Erik mentioned, there's only a 12% failure rate. So you're going to continue to have that autonomy. It's a very key part of this partnership. We have incorporated the use of some minimum terms for levels 2 and 3. And these, on level 3 align roughly with our Startup Kansas program, just to give you some idea of where this has all come from. But level 1 is still going to retain the ability to set all your own terms. There's a little bit of a twist to that because some of the factors related to loan terms do play into your loan portfolio score, but at the same time, there are no requirements that Network Kansas is setting about what terms you should set. Level 2 is going to have a 2% minimum interest rate, 10-year maximum loan, and a 90-day maximum deferment or the ability to match the partner. And level 3, that's a 5% minimum interest rate. And I did want to make one quick clarification on this because it was a question that came up at our Eastern regional retreat. And the 10-year maximum, length of note and the 90-day maximum deferment, those are pretty fixed, but we did want to retain the flexibility to grant you exceptions to that when they are needed. But those are going to require prior approval from Network Kansas. So, we already had kind of a situation come up with a real estate venture, and it was suitable to make an exception on these terms. So there's still a flexibility to fit your need locally, but we'll ask for Network Kansas to make approval in advance. One of the other changes that's coming July 1 relates to our board certified programs. These are the handful of programs that you're allowed to use your loan funds for. And once again, this is kind of just an evolution of that same process, but I think these are some minor tweaks that are going to really benefit your eCommunity teams quite a bit. Right now, board certified programs have different rules for each program. For example, if you do a YEC series event, you could spend up to $5,000 of your loan funds on it, and you can spend those $5,000 on any expense that you choose, as long as it relates to putting on that YEC series event, whether it's buying, food for the students or paper to print flyers, or giving a stipend to a teacher who's agreed to help. All of that would count and be acceptable use of funds. But on our Ice House program, for example, you have an $8,000 limit per class, but you can only use those funds on facilitator expenses and student licenses. And each program is like that. Each program has a different set of rules, a different maximum. Some of them we track annually, some of them we track by program. And in short, it's pretty complicated. We realized behind the scenes that we were putting a lot of time into just trying to explain that to you guys. And honestly, we thought it was time that we, walked the walk, because we always say that we think eCommunity leadership teams make great choices. And so why are we micromanaging how you can spend your loan funds on these board certified programs? It seemed a little ridiculous. We also do not currently have an annual limit on spending. We haven't ever really had any issues with this, but we realized with this annual model, let's say this is a wild scenario, but let's say a level 1 eCommunity wanted to use all $250,000 on programs. What if they sent like every business in their county to Destination Boot Camp and just spent all of that money? There was nothing really stopping them other than common sense. And like I said, we haven't really had an issue with this, but it did seem a little irresponsible when we're thinking about being stewards of this money. We think program spending is important, but we see it as a catalyst for business activity and sort of loan activity. So we wanted to make sure to put it in this proper place. So instead of that, what we're moving to is going to be an annual sort of single rule for board certified programs. There's going to be a single annual limit for spending. It'll differ by level. You'll have the autonomy to decide what expenses qualify within a program. And this gives you the ability, we hope, to budget and plan a little better for an entire year, because you'll know exactly sort of what your maximum amount of spending is, and you can work backward from that if you like and budget for the number of programs that you want to do. And this still only applies to Network Kansas board certified programs. So the annual spending limits per level come out of your annual loan fund maximum. So this is not in addition to, it's out of that number. So for example, a level 1 community has that $250,000 annual limit. Of that $250,000, you may use up to $25,000 on board certified programs. A level 2 community could use up to $15,000, and a level 3 community could use up to $10,000 on loan funds, or of loan funds. Another thing that I'm excited, it's a change, but it's sort of new in a number of senses, but I'm excited that we are going to create a new account, a new fund that's going to be a statewide fund. So over this process, it may have seemed to some of you like we're getting rid of a lot of things. We closed all of those individual loan accounts. We went from 61 accounts to these 3 regional accounts. We did a lot of consolidation. We talked a lot about sharing resources and sort of being good stewards of the money, and taking care of things for the good of the region and the good of the state. And I wanted to make that gesture at Network Kansas as well. So we are creating a new account. We're calling it the Entrepreneurship Support Fund. Once again, I know, a really clever name. But this is a statewide fund, and this is the fund that's going to support all the other stuff that we support as the e-community partnership. So it's going to be where I put the budget that I manage for programs and pilot programs and the different grants and things that we offer to really active communities. But it's also going to be where we put a little chunk of money for each of you. We mentioned earlier we've decoupled the e-community partnership from the tax credits. And we know that as a consequence of that, those of you who wanted to sell tax credits and earn extra money, essentially, for marketing funds, don't have the means to do that anymore. And we know that that's a concern. We think you have a lot of great projects at the local level and a lot of important things that you need some extra money for, whether it's a brochure talking about the loan funds, or to help pay for an entrepreneurship website, or an event that isn't a Network Kansas event. Maybe you want a little extra money to put on a special social media breakfast or something like that. So we knew there was a need for this, and this is the way that we're going to address that, is through the Entrepreneurship Support Fund. Each e-community is going to get an annual allocation in that fund. The numbers right now are a $3,000 allocation for level 1, $2,000 for level 2, and $1,000 for level 3. This is a sort of guaranteed, sort of automatic allocation. Once again, it's based on activity. So the more activity you've done, theoretically, the higher level of community you are, and therefore the bigger portion of those funds you'll get. I know that those numbers might seem small to some of you who are used to selling a large amount of tax credits, and you're right. It's smaller than what some of you are used to. And all I can say about that is, please bear with us. We're trying to do our best to address this fairly and sustainably. But for those of you who did not regularly sell tax credits, it might seem great because it's now like a new sort of allowance you get just for being a part of this partnership. We actually worked backward from the amount of money we expected we would have disbursed in marketing funds for the year. So we started with that fixed amount that we already would have had as an expense if we hadn't gone forward with these changes to the partnership, and tried to figure out how to evenly divide that up. My hope is that it's something we'll be able to keep an eye on over time, and perhaps give you more money. we aren't sure yet at what rate you're going to use this, how quickly you'll burn through it, or if we will have reason to shift things around. But we'll be keeping an eye on it, and hopefully this can grow over time. We will let you access those funds as soon as you're out of your marketing funds. And we'll do that on the honor system. As soon as you've depleted your marketing funds, just let us know when you would like to make a withdrawal from this account. This is just a little illustration to show you that you'll actually be pulling money from 2 different accounts depending on what's happening. So if you make a loan fund or have a check request for a board certified program, that's going to come out of your regional loan fund, just like you understand now. And if anything else happens, if you want to make a withdrawal from that entrepreneurship support fund, or if Network Kansas gives you some underwriting to do a program, we give you a grant to do a pilot program, or anything else like that, we'll be pulling that money out of the entrepreneurship support fund. So you see you have access to that large sort of statewide pool, and then also to your regional pool. So I talked a little bit about some of the changes that apply and the differences between the levels 1, 2, and 3. But at all levels, if you're a member of the eCommunity Partnership, Network Kansas will be managing the tax credit donations from here on out. I think this is now the 4th time I've said this, but I know it's one of our bigger changes. And Erik's going to go into the tax credits a little bit more at the end if you have questions about what that looks like for your donors. All of our eCommunity partners will continue to have access to exclusive eCommunity resources. There's a lot of things we've developed just for you, whether that's the eCommunity handbook, different guides and materials for doing the programs that we recommend. We waive the fee to participate in the YEC series. And we've got a staff of people like just for you and your communities who are really experts at this point working with communities to use entrepreneurship as an economic development strategy. So you'll still have access to all of those. We aren't limiting that in any way, and that is a special benefit that only eCommunities get. You also have access to all our Network Kansas programs, and that has not changed. So if for any reason you'd rather use one of our other funding programs instead of your eCommunity loan fund, that is something you can do. You can use our referral center and sort of that manpower there, participate in economic gardening and any of the other programs that we do or that we will do in the future. Applying to all eCommunities is also a new annual renewal process. I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but this is another one of the changes that's coming July 1. Like I said, it's really more of just a tweak along the same path that we've been going. But we realized that a weakness of the eCommunity Partnership is that it was never ending. We kind of saw that as a strength at first, but we've come to realize that people like boundaries and they like to have expectations, and that this is as much about the people involved in this effort as it is about the program. And so it seemed like the right time to introduce this annual process by which you essentially recommit. You look at what we're offering and decide if this is still a good fit for you and your community. And we'll be asking people to opt in. We're not just going to automatically include you and roll you over. Every year, we're going to be sending you a new award agreement, like I said, that clearly lines out what resources we're offering. And if you want to participate and take advantage of those resources, then you'll do so. You'll return the paperwork and officially be a part of the partnership for that next year. Just like a magazine subscription or any of your other professional affiliations, it's just going to be an annual cycle. We really, really, really believe that this needs to be a two-way street, and entrepreneurship needs to be the right strategy for you. So if for some reason it's not the right fit for your community at that time, you can opt out and choose not to be a part of the partnership for the coming year. In no way will that preclude you from working with us. It won't preclude you from accessing other Network Kansas resources or working with us in the coming years. We will be very open to working with you again as a partner in the future if it does become the right time for that. But we also think this offers, a great chance to sit down and reevaluate what you're trying to accomplish and how you want to use these resources. And I think that's something that you can really take advantage of your Network Kansas Regional Manager to help with that goal setting process and trying to set out, kind of a great roadmap for a year. I think a 12-month period gives you long enough to really accomplish some cool things. So we're hoping that this ends up being a big win for everybody. Your level for the year will be determined by an annual scoring process. And if for some reason at the 6-month mark, you believe that enough has happened in your e-community, whether it's loan activity or program activity, but if you believe there's been enough that has happened that it would raise your community score from one level to the next, you can ask us for an optional reevaluation. We will only allow you to move up. So if you were wrong, or if your activity has declined, we're not going to move you down a level at the 6-month mark. You're going to be for 1 year at the level that we promised you. But if you think you have earned access to the next level, we're going to let you have a shot at that, because we always want to help communities move forward and keep making progress and gain access to more resources if they need them. The scoring for the July 1 round and from here on out is going to have 2 parts to it. The score that determined the level that you're at now was your loan portfolio score. And I think everybody understands that pretty well. There are a number of factors that are a part of that, but essentially it has to do with your e-community loans, how many you've made, how well are they doing. We are going to move forward with a 2-part score that is 50-50, loan activity and entrepreneurship activity. One of the things we keep saying, and I know it's not just me, it's our entire staff, but we want to emphasize activity. What are you doing to try to change the environment at the local level? So that's going to be half of the score. Now, I admit this is difficult because a lot of this is subjective, but we think we've landed on a pretty good mix of objective and subjective questions. And this is just one of those things that we ask you to trust us, that we're always trying our best and that we're trying our best to be fair. And we acknowledge that we are human and we are not perfect, and we're going to continue trying to learn and make things better. But the entrepreneurship activity score may be a new thing, but at the same time, it's very, very, very old. Even dating back to the first group of 6 communities that joined the partnership, we've always asked certain questions and tried to figure out sort of certain things and what was happening. If you've ever applied to be in a community, which most of you have, obviously, or if you ever reapplied for additional funds, whether it was phase 2 or reapplication for tax credits, a lot of these things we have scored in some manner in the past. And so we tried to take the best of what we had learned over the past 10 years and incorporate it into a simple scoring process. We're actually still kind of working on fine-tuning all of this and working out the tweaks. But I think we're really close to something good. But this score encompasses the things we've always emphasized are important: entrepreneurship activity, your team, the progress that's happening, and a few community factors related to entrepreneurship. So the biggest component of the entrepreneurship activity score is entrepreneurship activity. This is things like board certified programs, pilot programs, other programs, other activities. Basically what it comes down to is, are you doing stuff to try to move the needle on entrepreneurship? We're trying to be pretty broad about how we define that and what activities we count. But of course, we're emphasizing Network Kansas recommended programs and the programs and pilots that you work with us on, because this is our program. These are the things that we're trying to work with you together on. And so if we're evaluating our partnership, those are the things we're going to emphasize. But by no means are we trying to limit our score to only our programs. The second biggest component of the score, and this is actually almost worth as many points as entrepreneurship activity, is the e-community team. Because we have realized, if there's one lesson we've realized over time, it's just how important you are at the local level as volunteers, and as far as your commitment and your relationship with us If we're trying to work together on something, then, we need partners who want to work with us. So we're ranking things like the engagement of the e-community point person with their Network Kansas staff member, the field manager that's assigned to work with you, the composition of your leadership team and financial review board. What members do you have on it? Is there a good mix of public and private and all the different roles that we've kind of recommended? And, what kind of steps are you taking to refresh those teams and make sure that people don't get burnt out? How often do you meet? We ask for monthly, but we'd really like at least regularly for the purpose of talking about entrepreneurship. It doesn't have to be an e-community only agenda, but we know that it's really unlikely that our community partners are going to make much progress if they never think or talk about entrepreneurship. And then also kind of looking at that broader engagement of the team. We know it's really tough for one person to just carry this load at the local level. We're hoping that you've got some volunteers around you or some staff around you who can help carry that ball. This is something that's going to continue to be important. It's going to be really tough for us to evaluate this right now. But as we move forward, one of the goals behind this idea of evaluating everybody annually and recommitting to the partnership annually is the idea that we're hoping that you can make progress. We're hoping that you can do a better job than ever at setting clear, attainable goals and then making progress toward those goals. Essentially, do you know what you want to accomplish, and are you taking steps to get there? And how can we, help you take those steps? And then a very small component of the score, we're calling community factors. And this one's really tricky for us to score too, and we fully admit that. But it's something that we know is really, really important, and it's something that really smart people like the Kauffman Foundation emphasize, and we're trying to take some notes from them on how to compose a score like this. But this is the place where questions, kind of from that historical e-community application show up, like what's your knowledge of and connection to entrepreneurship resources? Have you utilized Network Kansas programs? Have you utilized other partner programs? And is there kind of a broader level of community support for entrepreneurship? Because those all play into your success as well. As I mentioned, this scoring system and everything we're doing is a work in progress. I don't think we'll ever be done. We'll constantly be learning from you and trying to improve. And we know it's not perfect, but it's our goal to continue to make things better for you. We feel really good about the direction that we're headed. Erik mentioned we've been working on this really hard since August, but the work started long ago, really, from the day that Erik and Steve started playing with this concept. And then more recently, December 2016, we had a really, really deep staff meeting where we went deep into the strengths and weaknesses and challenges we were facing, and committed to some of the areas we wanted to improve at for you. And we've been developing this, like I said, over basically a 1.5 year period. So this is not some half-baked idea we're just tossing out to you. It's something that we really have tested and feel like it's going to work well for a while. It's consistent with our long-term goals and the practices and the way we work together with you. And we also think it gives kind of some of those additional benefits, more flexibility, greater resources for those who need them, a little lighter touch for those of you who just kind of want to dabble, and some nice perks and opportunities to grow. So I know a lot of you are probably wondering, okay, this is great, but what's next? We have still some things that we're finalizing behind the scenes, still kind of finalizing that scoring rubric that your coaches are going to be going through. Finalizing those levels. There will be additional material shared with you before July 1 that really clearly line out, what does level 3 get? What does level 2 get? What does level 1 get? So you know what to expect and can share that with your boards. And we're also starting our budget planning. I mentioned our fiscal year goes from July 1 to June 30. So we're trying to figure out how much do we need to set aside to support Ice House programs, to grow the YEC series, to set aside for grants to support really innovative pilots and projects that you guys dream up. So we're doing that right now too. And then we're also doing kind of the boring stuff, working with our lawyer to finalize those award agreements and figure out the nuts and bolts of the processes behind the scenes so we can make this as smooth as possible for you when it comes to accessing your funds, whether it's your loan funds or the allocation in the Entrepreneurship Support Fund. Just to be super clear, what you're doing and spending right now as an e-community team counts only for this 6-month period. So you don't need to worry that you've already overspent your program budget or anything like that. Everything starts over July 1 and it will run 1 full year. So, you know, we're letting you get adjusted to this idea, and you know, some of you may actually benefit. Maybe you'll spend at a faster rate than you would be able to support over a year period. So take advantage of that while you can, but everything starts over July 1. All right, I'm gonna go ahead, I guess, and open it up to questions. So if you're on your webinar, over to the right, that's where I'm looking right now, you should have a toolbar, and you can ask questions via there's a chat box that should be toward the very bottom, or there's a way for you to ask an individual question, kind of like raise your hand and ask a question. And I can see both of those, so if you have any, go ahead and share them with us. While you are thinking about your questions, we'll go ahead and just share a few questions that we received at other presentations. And I'll let Erik scoot on in here with me.
Yeah, if we get some questions, feel free to just jump in on that. One thing I do want to say for the 20 or so people that are on this webinar, you know, we all get better as we present things. We're all of us that are on this are used to presenting in front of people. Maybe not in this format. This is a little different, but presenting. That was probably the best, most thorough, most easy to understand of any of these that you've done, Anne. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad. This is the one we'll be putting on the internet.
Good. That's a good one to record. So you brought your A game at the right time.
Oh,
so
thank you.
I want to touch base real quick. One question we've had is about the tax credits. And when we've told the communities that they do not have to sell the tax credits anymore, that we're going to handle that, overwhelmingly, they're happy about that. Once they find out, as Anne said, that there's going to be marketing funds for them, they're okay with that, and they're thankful to not have to go through the process of selling tax credits. But we also find out from them that they have a lot of consistent donors that have utilized their credits, and they want to know how those people are going to be handled. They want to make sure they're not forgotten about. So the process we've put in place, and I want to preface this by saying, understand this to everybody that's on the webinar, we probably have about $4 million of requests for $2 million of tax credits, especially with the legislative change and the tax loophole. The demand is much higher than our supply. So the process we put in place was this. If any of if any of the e-community donors that donated for any of you last year that were selling tax credits, if anybody donated $15,000 or above, you don't have to worry about them at all. We have that amount earmarked, if you will, for them. And Christy at our shop will mail each of them a letter. She's already done it. And say, last year you donated X. Do you still want X again this year? And it's their job to communicate back with her. She's handling that separate from all of us. If any of your donors donated donated less than $15,000, the one thing I'm asking each of you on this webinar to do is, if you know of any of those donors and they want to donate again, we're not going to send those people a letter. So they need to know on their own to contact Christy here at Network Kansas and get on the waiting list. We don't have an amount earmarked for them, but they can get on the waiting list. So I wanted to explain that. And then secondly, we always are asked, Erik, Anne, this is a good story. the use of this money is really good. What's being done across the state with it. Why don't you go to the legislature and ask for $3 million of tax credits instead of 2, or 4 instead of 2? I hear you. Every year we have this conversation internally, but I just want you to understand where our position is with everything that's on the table for discussion in the state from a budget standpoint, school funding and things like that. We have chosen every year, and this year again, to keep our head below water, be thankful for the $2 million of tax credits we get, and not raise our hand and say we'd like 3 and risk somebody saying, well, let's discuss the 2 that you get. So we've just decided to be thankful for the $2 million, and we've made that decision each year, and we made it again this year. I trust that all of you understand the reason why. So thank you for the concern. We agree it's a good story, but we just don't feel the time's right to go raise our hand and ask for something while there's so many things on the table at the state. So thank you for that. I see you probably have a couple other questions.
Yes, we do have a couple questions. Nick asks, will this PowerPoint be available to relay to our e-community teams? And the answer is yes, it will. Easy one.
There we go.
All right, Luke asks, you probably stated this already, but when do you announce levels? Okay, I did not actually state this, so this is a great question. And I don't have a precise answer. We are trying to do this as close to July 1 as possible, while still allowing time for us to do the necessary paperwork. You know, I mentioned, you know, we're looking at that e-community activity score and your loan portfolio score. We're looking at those for 12 months back. And ideally that would align really closely with the past fiscal year, you know, sort of that June to July period. But we also know we need to have time to sort of do the scoring behind the scenes. So we need to pick the right date that's as close as possible to kind of cut that score off, and then run the scores, you know, prepare sort of all the information. So the short answer would be sometime probably in June, late June, or like right around July 1. All right. No other questions submitted yet. There is still time. I know we had a couple others that we answered on Monday. Do you recall?
I do, but I noticed that you addressed them during your part. So yeah, you did.
We want to give everybody a chance to ask your questions. So we'll kind of just hang out here.
I do have one I thought of that was asked. The loan and board certified program cap that Anne referred to, the level 1 being 250, level 2 being 100, and level 3 being 75. That is a soft cap, not a hard cap, and here's what I mean. Let's say, for example, that an e-community is a level 2 and therefore has that annual maximum of $100,000. And let's assume that between approved loans and board certified programs, they have used $80,000 of their $100,000, and they get a loan request come in for $30,000. It doesn't make sense that we should tell that community you can only approve $20,000 of that $30,000 application, and they need to go find the $10,000 elsewhere. So likewise, well, no, let me just stop. It doesn't make sense to say that. So the way it's set up is that deal, they can approve whatever loan application or program use takes you to the cap or above that max, finish that deal, then you're maxed out. So it's a soft cap. You can exceed it to finish whatever one loan application or one program request takes you to and above that maximum amount.
Ooh, another question from Nick. Okay, he asks, some e-communities have limited e-community budgets and therefore foster entrepreneurial activity with outside or local funds. will this activity be factored into decision making when it comes to evaluating a community's annual entrepreneurial activity score? Absolutely yes. And it's interesting that you bring this up, because I was actually up, I woke up before my alarm thinking about this, because I wanted to make sure I addressed it in the score as well as in our behavior. It's already a part of our choices and how we, choose these things. So that's definitely something that we look really favorably on. If you have additional resources locally, we expect a flourishing ecosystem to be leveraging those, to be utilizing those. And as most of you know, there's actually a lot of benefits to doing this. You help sort of develop those relationships that are really going to be important for this sort of long-term activity and growth. But that's kind of with a caveat. We want you to be trying to leverage those resources. And if you have those resources, we hope that those are useful to you. But we also acknowledge that some people don't have the vast sort of local resources to rely on, and in which case, we're not going to penalize them for that. We're going to try to help them, grow that. And we also recognize that just because you have resources doesn't mean that they want to work with you. So once again, we are looking at, have you tried to make those relationships? Have you tried to, ask for sponsorship or reach out to somebody? We ask those questions. We aren't going to be sort of hard and fast about, you need to have this percentage of sponsorship from, local businesses, and this percentage can come from us. It's just impossible to come up with a fair custom fit that way. But, we do think it's important. So it's kind of like a yes and no.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else.
Okay, well, then I guess we won't keep you guys any longer. I can see most of you hung with us right till the end, so we really appreciate your time doing this. We do want to say thank you for sharing your morning with us, and thank you for putting up with us as we try to figure out how to use this webinar technology. We've really liked it, so I hope that it worked well for you, but if it did or did not, feel free to shoot me an email, because I'd be curious hearing your experience as we experiment with maybe using this further. Oh, one more. Oh, no, I think it's just like a thank you. All right. Anyway, and of course, if you think of a question later, this isn't your only chance to ask questions. We wanted to try to provide opportunity for everybody to hear the same presentation and the same information. But at any time you can contact Eric or me or your Network Kansas, regional contact. We all have the same sort of information and the same ability to assist you. I had a couple questions on this, but just to follow up, this information will be available online after this. We're going to make a recording of this entire presentation available for anybody who has just like an hour to kill and wants to sit through the full explanation. We're also going to make the PowerPoint available if you'd like as a reference or to show at any of your community leadership team meetings. And we're going to have sort of like a summary blog post and some, sort of summary, probably a PDF that you can have. We're going to have the full sort of level by level comparison available as a nice chart that you'll be able to download as a PDF. It's not ready yet. It'll be ready really soon, but the 2 presentations will be up really shortly. So those will be on our website, but I'll also send out an email of some kind. So we'll have access to all of this stuff later. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.